Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. And when your kids get back to school, please tell your kids' teachers, their principal, their librarian. Please also subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Cloran. He'll be here to celebrate Life Rocks. Before we invite Asher into the studio, we want to let you know about something else that really rocks. You're going to love it. Drawing with your kids. It is coming January 1st. I'm so excited. We have invited some of the best illustrators in the world to teach you and your kids how to draw a favorite character from their books. This is such a fun project for me. We have some amazing illustrators that have already become part of the project. Nick Ulo will be with us teaching us how to draw her beloved character patches. Lauren Castillo, Chad Otis, David Ezra Stein, Jess McEachen, and those are only the first few episodes. You'll be able to follow it at drawingwithyourkids.com. We'll also be announcing all of the episodes on readingwithyourkids.com. We'll be having a Drawing With Your Kids YouTube channel, and we'll also be sharing the videos on our YouTube channel as well. Can't wait. Very first episode, you'll be able to watch it here on the Reading With Your Kids podcast. It's happening January 1st, 2023. Drawing with your kids. So much fun. Join us right now from the beautiful city of Queensland in Australia. Our guest is here today to celebrate something called Life Rocks. And I think we are really going to rock finding out what it is. Please welcome to the show, Cloran. Hey, Asher, how are you?
Hey, I'm so good, Jed. Thanks for having me on.
I'm excited to have you on. I was visiting your website, and it looks awesome. I'm not going to try to describe it. Tell us all about Life Rocks.
All right. Well, Life Rocks is interactive earth sciences and holistic health for children, families, and teachers. Because multi-generational learning is something that's missing a little bit in the Western system, where actually we learn best when we're with other generations, children slightly older than us, children slightly younger than us, adults, aunties, uncles, all around. So, yeah, we looked at the education model that was going on, and we realized that most of it's lacking interactive learning. None of it's hands-on anymore. It's all rote knowledge, and it's about this teacher up the front of the classroom telling students what to learn, as we're trying to bring back more that community aspect of learning. So we do this through creating books, illustrated books that connect children to nature, because a lot of science is really dry, It's black and white, it's abstract terms, it's technical language. But the original living science that was practiced by people for thousands of years was practical. It was observing weather patterns. It was looking at the seasons. It was looking at animals and how they move throughout a year. And these patterns is what taught our ancestors how to be in nature, how to live in this world. So we've come full circle with Life Rocks, and we've tried to design resources that are really engaging through using art. For instance, soil science is normally something that's pretty boring to learn about, but we bring it to life through amazing art and stories and poems and games and activities.
And for those of you who weren't able to see that, Asher showed us a cover of one of the books that shows a tree, but not just the tree and a child standing underneath it, but seeing all the roots and everything that's happening underneath the soil, something that we don't notice. And it's really fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. And there's microscopic life that lives in the soil that is the most bizarre and strange and wonderful world. But until we know about it, we just think that brown soil is just boring and dirty and it's just beneath our feet and we don't need to think about much else. So these are the kind of little concepts that we get from science. Maybe as an adult, I got from science when I started to read proper books about it that ignited my imagination. How do we translate that back to children and give it back to children? Well, we use art, we use games, we use drama and this kind of thing. But once again, we always have to work with the systems that are out there. So we've designed all of our games to be fitting with the Australian curriculum, as well as supporting homeschoolers in being able to deliver the Australian curriculum whilst also doing it artistically, doing it creatively, and learning in a community.
One of the things that I love about what you're describing is this idea of intergenerational learning. One of the things we've talked about a lot here on the podcast is, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but I know here in the States, the idea of going to an event where you have kids and parents and grandparents and everybody at these events, it just doesn't happen very often. And, you know, there's stuff for kids to do and stuff for adults to do and stuff for old people to do. And I think that that's a real tragedy. My beautiful wife is a Latina, and when I go to places like Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, Panama, and I see events, and everybody's there, grandparents and kids and parents, and it's like, this is the way it should be.
Yeah. It totally is the way it should be.
Yeah. How do you think we arrived at the place where we are now, not only in the States, but Australia, England, a lot of Western countries, where it's like, okay, so you're 5 years old. It really doesn't matter where you're reading at. It doesn't matter what your interests are. You're going in with this group of 20 or 30 other 5-year-olds, and you're going to sit, and you're going to be quiet, and just listen to this person up at the front of the room.
Yeah, I think it's a very complex history, but to simplify it in some ways, I think that the schooling systems equip a culture and equip a society to have a solid workforce. So it helps to categorize people, it helps to put them in departments, it helps to break them up into all little sections so they can do their job as a cog in the machine. So the schooling system is really good for producing lawyers and accountants and doctors and nurses and teachers and all of the people that help to run society. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just that when we systematize things so much, it leaves out the creative element. It leaves out the web and the weaving that joins all of elements in society together, and we forget, you know, the beauty of culture and the richness of traditions and the ways our ancestors lived and all of these things that, yeah, really hold the heart of humanity together. Yeah, so I think it's top-down system control that's just separated us, and now we're sort of scratching our heads like, oh, is this really what we want?
Well, as someone who tapped out of the machine and tapped out of being a cog 35, 40 years ago, that's definitely was a system I didn't want to be a part of, and I wasn't a part of, and I'm really happy for that. Yeah. But it makes perfect sense. I mean, even, you know, I kid about me. Oftentimes say I'm almost 100 years old, but when I was in school, there was more of the intergenerational, not so much parents and grandparents coming in, but the 8th graders would help the 1st graders, and there would be more of this, you know, and even in my kids and a lot of the Catholic schools, a lot of the religious schools here in the States, that still happens, where there's the older kids, and, you know, maybe it's not the brightest kid in the 8th grade, but there's a kid in the 8th grade who can read. Maybe he has a little bit of trouble reading, but you ask him to sit down and read to a younger kid or help a younger kid with a science project, and suddenly that kid who was struggling in the 8th grade has somebody who looks up to him and is building his self-confidence. And he knows more. He might not know as much as his classmates, but he certainly knows more than a first grader, and he's able to share that and build that kid's confidence. And it's a beautiful thing, and I don't know why it's not being done everywhere.
Yeah, well, there's a certain amount of schools that do practice that. And like you say, maybe the schools where you grew up, that was a common practice. It can be certain teachers that are just aware, so they make it happen. Montessori schools are very focused on multi-generational learning, and it's an open style classroom where there's, children of different ages, all of that enabling each other to teach. And I think it's basically that the Western model of teaching has become very limited, and now we're at a point where we have to look back into the past about how things worked before. How do we raise our children before? And multi-generational learning's one, but also student-led learning, where the child themselves is passionate about something. Well, the teacher becomes a facilitator for that passion rather than a person up the front of the classroom dictating everything. They're curious about the children in their classroom and what their interests are, and they help and guide them. They become a guide towards that child's passion, towards that child's interests.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of these little concepts that are missing from the model that we're working with now, but there's definitely some schools out there. I'd say Steiner, Montessori, Reggio Emilia schools, nature schools, the forest schools in Northern Europe, and all the research that comes out of these schools on these methods of education shows that they have better results.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm not surprised at all. So what inspired you to start Life Rocks?
I had quite a diverse background in my education itself. So I went to about 5 different schools. 3 of them were public. 1 of them was a Steiner school. 2 of them were in the city. 3 of them were in the country. And then I think this perspective gave me a unique insight into education, how teachers were doing it, what was working, what wasn't. And I had some very powerful experiences in nature that tapped me into my own source of health, my own source of spirituality, and snapped me out of some quite disconnected states and honestly depression and sickness as a teenage person who I was very unwell. I couldn't figure it out. But nature became my place of healing and my place of connection. And so once I realized that, I just wanted to pay it forwards to the little boy in me that didn't have that, or didn't have a mentor, or didn't have an older friend who could help him out with all the questions that I had. Mm-hmm. So, I started to study natural health, became a movement practitioner, helping people rehabilitate through movement and exercise and diet. And then I met a geologist who his passion project was to teach kids earth science, and he asked me to help him, and the rest is history. So he handed me the reins of Life Rocks, which was his creation. He's the founder of Life Rocks, John Rowntree, a Canadian geologist. And he said, Asherah, I'm an old guy, you're a young guy, I want you to take the reins and let's make this thing happen. So that was 5 years ago. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. I had one of the most wonderful experiences in my life. I was traveling on the road, going from one school to another, doing my educational magic show. Had a little bit of time. I was going by a cavern system. It was the middle of the week, and I arrived there maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and wanted to see if I could go on the tour. And I was the only one. And so the guide took me down. He just happened to be a geologist, and he started going through the dopey little scripted tour, like, look, here's the highlight of our tour, and he pointed up in the sky, and there's a light way up top, and I'm like, and at some point I said, look, you're a smart guy. Can you just tell me what makes you fascinated that's in this cave? Because I don't want to hear the jokes are dumb. I don't want to hear them. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. And I had a master's class. Not that I remember and retained a lot of it, but it was just so wonderful to be with this person and to let him share his passion. I mean, he loved the earth and he loved geology and he loved showing me what this rock was and why the water is coming from here and that. And it was a phenomenal time.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's so much knowledge contained in all of the generations.
Yeah.
Every single one of them has a unique perspective. And yeah, it's a shame that we cut ourselves off from that. We put our old people in nursing homes, and really we ought to be sitting by the fireside listening to them each evening.
Yes. I agree. As I get close to that nursing home age, I agree. Don't put me there. Put me by the fire. Not too close, but anyway. So give us an example of maybe one activity. You said that they're very interactive. What's one of the activities we might want to do with our kids?
Well, one of the most powerful nature connection things that you can do is called a nature sit spot. And it actually comes from the Native American tradition over where you're at. But it's finding a spot in nature near your house, near to where you are, that you can visit every day. And you just go there and you just sit. And it's not about a particular meditation practice, but it's more about opening up your senses. What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you see? What do you feel? And just having that receptivity open and just being in the space. And what people find is that it's immensely calming for their whole body and mind, but they observe patterns in nature and they feel this sense of connection and depth, connection to their environment and depth of awareness come over them in this space, and it only increases as time goes on. So this is just one sort of principle which sort of shows that nature connection can connect us to our body, our heart, our sense of empathy for the world. That's one of the deeper immersion practices. Yet, if we're talking about the resources that LifeRocks has developed, for instance, the soil book, which is all illustrated and rhyming, it teaches about the history of all the organisms in the soil that have built up to make soil over these billions of years. And as the teacher or the parent is reading the book, every character, each organism throughout the history of soil is on a card that we've got on a board game. So all the children have all of their cards and they're listening to the teacher read the book. And as each organism comes up, they can place one of the cards down on the big mat, which is a big soil representation of all the layers of soil and where all the creatures live. So it's this board game that's being played whilst the teacher's reading. And then once all the cards are placed, you can then learn about the interactions between all of the organisms in the soil. And even on each card, there's quests to go outside and maybe find the creature, or to move in that way that that creature moves, or to learn an interesting fact about them. So we try to roll as many different modes of learning into our resources as possible, so that we've got kinesthetic games, we've got auditory sounds of the soil, we've got language, we've got the visuals, all of these different ways in which children and adults love to learn. We're trying to hit all areas at once with our activities.
Pretty wonderful. I'm imagining that would be a lot of fun. And it sounds like something, you know, I'm very fortunate. I live within the city of Boston, but we're on the border. There is literally a wildlife sanctuary on the other side of my property, on the over the fence. And so I certainly can find a spot in nature. But I'm imagining even somebody who lives in downtown Boston can find a spot where they can go to every day. And we're not talking Dunkin' Donuts. You can go to every day and just experience nature.
Exactly. It can be so simple, even for someone who lives in a city, sitting by the back door and maybe just sitting next to a tree or looking at a skyline or even sitting next to a pot plant and just looking at it. Maybe that's your sit spot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't have to be this deep off in the woods experience. Nature is everywhere and all around. So whatever opportunity that person has to connect to nature, yeah, there's something close by.
Yeah,
we don't need to make it complex.
Yeah. Well, I really love this. And you mentioned that Life Rocks meets the Australian educational standards, and so it's great for Australian schools, it's great for Australian after-school programs, Australian homeschoolers. Are the standards that much different than the standards here in the States? Is this something that folks in the States or in Canada or England would be able to really get something out of?
It absolutely is. And the standards aren't too different, especially when it comes to science. Australian curriculum holds a high standard, and especially one of the benefits of our resource is that because it's age diverse, it rolls the entire Australian curriculum from early learning, which is from the age of 4, through to year 6, which is the age of 12. So 4 to 12-year-olds will benefit immensely and learn pretty much everything there is to know about soils at a level that really is about a high school level standard. Mm-hmm. Even the teacher's resource book in there could be picked up by any teacher who's not a science teacher, and they could easily teach the subject, because a lot of teachers have a concern that if they get a science resource and they don't have a science background, they won't be able to teach it. But we've made it digestible to every level so that a parent, a teacher, or a science-trained teacher could pick up the resource and teach it. So yeah, there's huge amounts of information in there, and it's a very in-depth and fun way to learn soils for anyone from any country that speaks English.
That's wonderful. Well, I know people are going to want to know how they can get their hands on Life Rocks so they can connect with the soil, and so they should know how to connect with you.
Yeah. Well, you can head to our website, www.liferocks.school, and check out our resources there. We've just done an update on the soil kit, where our next delivery of units on that is coming in next year. But right now you can get the book and the card game, and there's plenty of free resources. And we also have a podcast where we invite on educators and health expert and childhood development experts and just ask their opinion and ask them to educate our audience. So there's always lots going on at Life Rocks, and we're very active on Instagram as well, where we post a lot of great content. So that's LifeRocks_AUS Oz.
Awesome. Well, this has been really fascinating, and I really want to encourage people to check this out because I think it would be a lot of fun. Certainly, I know my wife, who's a retired teacher, would have loved this. She always had fun teaching kids about erosion, and it would really make them interactive with the water and the sand, and it was always a mess, and she loved it, and the kids loved it, and I know that her kids would have loved this too. So check it out. It's liferocks.school, you said?
Yeah, liferocks.school.
We've had a great time speaking to the driving force behind Life Rocks, Asher Cloran. Asher, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Jed. It's been a pleasure.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We'll be ending 2022 with a look back at some of our favorite moments from this year. We'll be listening to highlights from our conversations with Jason Brotman, Ben Feller, and Jasmine Simon. That's the next episode of the podcast. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we'll start by thanking our guest, Asher Cloran. Please be sure to check out Life Rocks. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Mirabella Q, Jordan Saley, Stephanie Davila, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. by Reading with Your Kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.